I have obsessed with trying to figure out
Yeah.
what is it about reggae that makes it so cool. And like, I think if you boil it down, what I've found in my sort of searching is it comes down to the heartbeat, and it comes
Mm.
down to like, you know, Afrocentric music. Like, I think that in that tribal, like if you think of the origins of, you know, the 12 tribes of Israel and like all of the, you know, if you go way back, I think that they were jamming on the heartbeat, the dunkum, 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 chink it, dunkum, chink it. It's that, it's got that
Yeah.
pulse and that feeling. And I think what that is it's like, it's inspired by the creator, and but it's their own interpretation of, you know, their music. And it is very much their music. And I also want to say, like, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are what I would consider a culture vulture. And, you know, that's the last thing that I want to be. What I'm doing is I'm trying to understand what that music is, because I love it so much. It resonates with me so much that, like, I just want to pay homage to it and, like, inspire other people to make it, because it's absolutely amazing. I think, you know, reggae music is the best music in the world. And I think it's because of how it makes you feel. And like, going like even further deeper to that is like, because the rhythm that we were given, and I say we, but like the people that
Yeah.
originated the music, not myself, they were given the heartbeat, and they use
Hmm.
that as inspiration to make their own music. And I think that's why I love it, because
Yeah.
I have a heartbeat. I know everybody does, but like, just there's something about, you know, I think the tempo too, and there, you know, I know I'm getting real deep into like thought about this, but
Yeah.
I sometimes ponder about it. It's like, I'm a pretty laid back guy. I got a pretty low resting heart rate, and I love those slower, you know, 60 BPM, where the swing is really apparent and wide open. You know, I resonate with those BPMs, and
Yeah.
you know, for that
That,
reason, I think, you know, is what it's my best guess at it, anyways.
yeah, man, I love that. And it's so interesting that you mention like that's where reggae music comes from, is kind of like the heartbeat and um yeah, like the source of life, you know. And it I was thinking about that, kind of reminded me of something that Lee Perry said about dub and what he was inspired by, like what he was going for with when he was creating all of these sounds. And he would say that he was inspired by like the sounds of nature, like the thunder crashing, like the
Yeah.
sounds of the beach, all this stuff, like. And it's so interesting that that's like where a lot of this music comes from, and maybe that's why it resonates. And also, I'd never thought about this before, but you said like, yeah, like maybe like the rate of your heart, like you're kind of a laid back, easy person. Maybe that's why like these tempos or frequencies
Yeah.
kind of like resonate with us. So yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought of it that way. So thank you for sharing that perspective. I really yeah, it's some food for thought for me too.
Yeah, man. I think you also, I didn't say it, but you said it. Something that I just picked up on. Maybe I did. I don't think I did. I'll have to watch it back. You said frequency, frequency. And like, you know, as a mix engineer, I think of frequencies. I think of the lowest low, the 20
Yeah.
hertz that we can kind of perceive, and then the highest high, maybe 20 kilohertz or whatever. If you're 30, if you're a dog, 50, whatever. But like, there's also the tempo is the frequency too, because it's how frequent, you know, it turns around.
Yeah.
And I've also heard that there's something special about the frequency, having the right frequency, singular, not frequencies, but
Hmm.
frequency of the music. And that came from Aston Family Man Jr. That was a quote that I heard from him, and I think it's
Interesting.
along the same. There's something there. Do I know what it is? Not exactly. And I think that that's part of why I like reggae too. Is like, there's some mystery, some, you know, there's a natural mystic flowing through the air. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, we don't know exactly all the things about it, but you know, I think people from different walks of life can still appreciate whatever that is. You know.
Yeah. That's so like when you're talking about like the frequency, it's almost like a tempo at that point. Like how often like it's
Yeah.
like how often that's occurring, and it's almost like
Yep.
hypnotic at a certain point, I feel like, especially with reggae, you know.
It is, man. I think, even Peter Tosh said something about that where it's like he's like, I figured out how to get people into this, like, you know, I don't want to say
Like a trance
yeah,
almost?
like trance. I don't know. That word I'm not a huge fan of, but like he figured out how to get people like locked in to listening,
Yeah.
to paying attention to his music, right? And I think it's that hypnotic or whatever you want to say. It's that like it's the it's the clanging of brass and cymbals, you know. And I think
Mm.
of like when I think of the word frequency too, I think of the ringing hi-hat. You know, when I play and you listen to some of the real old stuff, they used to have the super bright hi-hat
Yeah, I've noticed that.
that had this like peaky, not harsh, but you know, it definitely tickled your ears, you know?
Yeah.
And it puts you in this like you're thinking about that maybe consciously or not. For me it's consciously because I'm trying to figure out what makes it great. But
Yeah.
yeah, Peter Tosh has said something along the lines of like, I understand how like to make the code and like make people listen so that I can actually tell people what I want to say, right? And
Yeah.
and so because I mean as an artist, right, you imagine you're Peter Tosh, what do you want to do? Well,
Mm.
you want to get your message out to all the people that would listen, you know? And it's funny because I'm the opposite. Like, I just want to make the music. I don't sing. I don't have a message per se in my music. I mean, I do. I'm a spiritual person, you know, but like that's for me. And people that listen they're gonna catch it. It's not intentional, but you know, I'm put on this earth for a reason, and I feel like this is it. You know, outside of providing for my family and you know my day job and all that stuff, but yeah, you can get pretty deep with it, but I think it's pretty cool that you know reggae is it definitely has there's something different about it that piques you know the interest and gets people in this like state of mind, I guess you
Yeah.
call
I
it.
think maybe instead of a trance, like maybe more of like a meditative state would
Yeah,
be something more like along the, 'cause I think about that sometimes. Like even like Midnight's another band that I would think of that like is
yeah,
kind of like meditative, and then like when you kind of get into that state, you become really receptive to the message and like the spirituality in the music. And at least that's been my experience with it. I think Peter Tosh is kind of similar in that way, like almost like a prophet in some of his music.
yeah, definitely.
So
You could say the same about Bob too. I think
yeah,
you know, and even Bunny Wailer, like
yeah,
a
so
lot
many
of
of
them
them.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, like that's almost one of the secrets of reggae. I feel like is getting people into that mind state and that like yeah that openness to yeah almost like this like a spiritual experience in some ways I would say.
yeah,
And yeah, all this stuff is kind of reminding me of another thing too. I was Big Youth was talking to me at one point, and he said like something that kind of blew my mind a little bit. He's like, hey man, like when you're playing your trumpet, like think about what you're putting out into the world. Because he's like, just because we don't see the vibrations coming out of our instrument, like they could go on forever. Like we don't know where that vibration ends. So
whoa,
think about like the intention that when you're playing, like that intention is being like transmitted to people. Even if they don't hear it, they might be affected by like that vibration that we're creating as like musicians. And that
man.
kind of like tripped me out too.
Honestly, I have goosebumps as you're telling me that story. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Wow, what a pleasure to get that kind of mentorship from a guy like him.
Yeah, it kind of reveals like the mind state that a lot of these musicians were in as they made this music, and perhaps why it's affected us the way that it has. And it's even interesting too that what you were saying earlier about you know, you said you're like, oh, you know, I'm not like, I don't really have a message in my music. But interestingly, like, even though the music you make is instrumental, like, I kind of already picked up on like the thing you said earlier. Like, you were kind of saying your mission statement is like, you just want to spread the joy of reggae music and inspire people the way that it's inspired you. And like, that's what I've gotten out of your music without you even having told me that, you know? So I think
That's
like
pretty cool, man.
sometimes like the intention that we put into our music can, even if there's no words, like it still can be translated depending on like, yeah, like what we're putting into it. So yeah, that's,
That makes sense, man. Yeah, it's like it's maybe not completely intentional, and it's okay to be intentional is what Big Youth was telling you. Like, yeah, figure out what it is that you're sending, you know,
Yeah.
when you're doing that amazing line, like what is it that you want people to maybe like be able to grab and
Yeah.
you know, yeah, that's pretty awesome.